Hello, it's Pam at Quilt Beginnings, and this is the second in our series of owners videos. And we are going to cover the baby lock top of the line machines, and we are going to cover the sewing component today. So if you have a sewing only machine or a sewing and embroidery machine, this video is for you. So when you turn your baby lock machine on, if you have a sewing and embroidery machine, you're going to get a similar screen to this, which is going to show your sewing and the embroidery. If you're on a sewing only machine, it is automatically going to come up to the sewing screen. So you'll have a screen that looks something like this. On the baby lock, in sewing, you have two choices: utility stitch or character stitch. Your machine is automatically going to default to the utility stitch, and it's automatically going to default to stitch 1-03. Stitch 1-03 is straight stitch, middle position. You're also going to find some icons like this at the bottom of your screen. These two are your automatic tie-off. So if these two are depressed, no matter what stitch you're doing on your baby lock, when you start sewing, it is automatically going to do a tie-off. The tie-off might be forward, backward, forward, or it might be 3 single stitches in one position. But in order to get those, you must have these two depressed. The other icon that most of the machines have is the pivot function. And by depressing that button, every time you stop sewing, the needle will go down, the presser foot will come up so that you can pivot. And on the Solaris, you can choose whether you want your needle to stop every time in the down position or if you want it to stop in the up position. However, if you have the pivot function engaged, it's always going to stop with the needle down. You also have buttons at the bottom that allow you to change the length, the width, and the tension. The left-right shift simply moves your stitch from right to left. So you can move this stitch clear to the left. So by touching this, I'm now moving my stitch to the right position or to the left position. The stitch shows directly on the screen. It tells us which foot we're going to use, and it shows the stitch in real time. If you look at your icons at the bottom, you'll notice that the default has a black box around it. If there's not a black box, that means we have changed the default. I can touch the reset, and by touching the reset, it brings it back to the default. Or if you turn your machine off, it'll automatically reset to default. So if you change a stitch and you like your stitch better than what you would use in the default, you can simply hit the memory key, and then every time you turn your machine on, it will come back to your saved stitch. Also, on your screen, you will notice that you might have a column here that says page 1 of 3 or 2 of 3. On the Solaris, we can simply use our finger to scroll through the stitches. If you don't have the scroll feature, you'll have an arrow at the bottom, and if you touch the arrow, it brings up the stitches that we cannot see. So in our utility category, in our regular stitches, we have all of these stitches. You're also going to see, depending on which machine you are using, that we have various categories in the utility stitch file. So on the Solaris, if I touch category 2, I have another set of stitches, such as my blanket stitch, my blind hem stitch, etc. Again, you might have to use the arrows at the bottom to scroll to the other stitches. If I go to category 3, I have some ladder stitches, stitches that I can use if I'm doing cording, etc. If I go to category 4, I have all of my buttonholes. I also have a stitch that I can sew a button on, and I never sew buttons by hand because using the built-in button stitching makes it quite easy. I have several buttonholes I can choose from, and if these buttonholes aren't long enough, you also can do a manual stitch. The good news is if you're on a baby lock embroidery machines, many of those allow you to do a buttonhole up to 4 inches on the embroidery side of your machine. Also, one of my favorite features in sewing is the directional stitching. So the baby lock machine allows you to sew to the right, to the left, to up and down. So I could actually sew a label on. I could sew down the left side. I could change my stitch and sew across the bottom. I could change to the up arrow and stitch up and then stitch back without ever turning my fabric. I can also stitch at a 45-degree angle, which is very convenient if you're mitering corners, mitering your binding, etc. And on many of the machines, you also have that directional sewing, but in a zigzag stitch. And then the Q stitch is a quilter stitch. So these are some of the stitches that quilters often use, and you can actually set your machine up. So instead of it coming to category 1, it will actually come to category quilting. And then on this machine, it also has some side cutter stitches here. And this particular category is only available on the Solaris. But again, if I want to go back, if I simply touch my utility stitches, it brings up the multiple categories that are within that file folder. So if we look at a baby lock machine other than the Solaris, you're going to see that when we're in the utility stitches, stitch 103 still comes up, but our screen looks a little different. Where on the Solaris we could scroll. On this kind of a machine, when it shows that we're in our utility stitches, the first category, it shows we have 3 pages, and to get to the additional pages, I'm simply going to touch the arrow. This is page 2 of 3 and page 3 of 3. Likewise, if I go to category 2, I have 3 pages. My buttonholes, I have 2 pages. I still have my directional sewing and my quilting stitches. Whereas we had to touch the edit key on the Solaris, on this machine, we have our drop the feed dogs key, we have our mirror image key, and where we would touch for our double needle. We still have our pivot function and our tie-off functions. Anytime we have it in black, it's the default. If I change something, it's no longer with a black box around it. And here, if I want to reset something, I'm going to touch the pocket and touch reset. That changes everything back to the default. Also within the sewing portion of the baby lock machine, we have beautiful character and decorative stitches. So when I touch this category, on most of your machines, you're going to see a different screen than what appears on the Solaris. The Solaris happens to have their categories at the top of the machine. So once again, if I go to category number 6, these are all decorative stitches that we can use to make beautiful trims for clothing or pillowcases. Category 7 has more decorative stitches, and we can keep scrolling through. When you look at your machine, most of them have a couple of these categories, but then we have some stack stitches. These are what we call heavy satin stitches, and if we choose one of these, I just want to show you that on the Solaris you can change length and width, but on most of the machines you can't change the length or width. The beauty of the Solaris, it allows you to change a lot of your stitches to make them tighter, wider, etc. So not only do we have the beautiful satin stitches, we have some adjustable stitches, and all of our categories allow us to stack stitches. In other words, I could make a stitch, move one position to the right, and do another stitch. And we'll show that in a future video. We also have cross stitches that look like hand-sewn cross stitches. We have other stitches that were brought from the utility stitch field. So in the character stitch field, we can combine stitches. We cannot combine stitches in the utility field. So what Baby Lock has done is brought some utility stitches into the character and decorative stitch field so that you can use those if you're sequencing. And then we have 3 fonts that we can use, plus a Cyrillic font. But remember, these fonts are in sewing, and these fonts are only going to be as wide as your presser foot. So these are fonts that we would use if we were putting a label maybe on a child's piece of clothing, or if we just wanted to do a small quilt label. If you have an embroidery machine, you're going to prefer going to your embroidery machine. And then we have a pocket in which we can save anything that we've combined or any stitch that we've created. On the other machines, when we go to character and decorative stitches, you're going to see that there is an arrow button here, and this brings up or collapses. So in other words, on the Solaris where I scrolled through my decorative stitches, here I've got the same categories. If I touch one of them and I open it up, I have to touch a stitch. It shows the stitch in real time, which foot I'm using. And then instead of having an edit key here, everything is found under this collapsible menu. The one additional feature here is I can flip or rotate my designs up or down, or left or right. And because we can no longer on these machines change our length and width, we have an option of only large or small. On the Solaris, we can actually change length, width, we can do many more settings, but here the default is large, and if I touch the S, it makes the same design smaller. So similar stitches, similar navigation, but things are just in different areas. But you do have to remember that this is a collapsible or expandable file on the other machines. Okay, so let's go to category 2, and I'm going to pick stitch 218, and I'm picking that because it definitely has the curls going to the right. So if I go into my edit feature, we also have the triangles. So there are some triangles that flip left and right, so if I touch it, it's going to make the curls flip to the left. On some of the stitches, you also get the option to flip them up and down. So that is what this one is for. This takes you back to the beginning of any pattern. So if I'm stitching and I finish, if I finish in the middle of a stitch, but I want to start a second row back at the beginning, this always takes you to the beginning of the pattern, right here. And this one finishes a pattern. So if I touch this button on any stitch, this gives us 1 stitch, and this gives us multiple stitches. This is if I'm doing anything with a double needle. So if I choose this and choose double needle, I can actually thread my machine with my double needle, and the bobbin feeds both of those. The only problem with using your double needle is your never miss needle threader will not thread either needle because it will only thread the one needle in the center position. But I can use like a 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter, and these are going to be the distance of my needle. So the pattern beginning and pattern ending, it's really more useful in the decorative stitches, so we'll cover that in a future video. The only other icon that I did want to point out is this little thing that looks like a staple or a flying telephone. That is actually drop your feed dogs. And I don't know how many times we have people call and say, how do I drop my feed dogs? This is it. So when I touch it, it drops the feed dogs so that I can do free motion quilting. As soon as I drop my feed dogs, it tells me I need to put my open toe foot on. When I disengage this button, the feed dogs do not come back up automatically. You have to take a stitch or crank your hand wheel towards you 1 whole revolution to bring your feed dogs back to the up position. So I want to talk about the icons up here. The first one is, like, I just want to clear my screen. So whenever you're not sure what you want to do or you just want to start something over, a lot of people just turn their machine off and back on. It's just as easy just to touch the home. So just say, I want to go home. And when it says it's going to cancel a stitch, it is not going to delete it from your machine. It's simply going to clear the screen. So I'm going to touch OK, and it takes me back home. So if you're lost and you're not sure what you're doing, home always takes you back. This will lock your machine, as will this. And you're going to notice that when I touch this, it makes my screen so that if a little one comes around and plays with it, nothing's going to happen. Again, by just touching this, it brings everything back to life. Okay, your question mark tells you different things about your machine. There's actually an entire manual built in your machine and sewing explanations and videos. If you're on anything but the Solaris, it might look a little different than this, but you can find operation guide. It will tell you what different stitches are used for. Go ahead and look in your machine and you'll find that this is very useful. This is what we call our settings page. It's a piece of paper, and on some of your machines it may be at the bottom, but when you touch this, it gives us all the settings on the machine. So if you're in sewing, the first part of this pages tell you about sewing. So again, if you want to adjust your presser foot height or your light or any of that, anytime we ask you to refer to settings, we're talking about this page. This is your camera button, and this button, when you depress it, it simply shows you what's directly below your needle. It's not used for scanning on your embroidery machine. A lot of people want to touch that when they want to scan. This simply shows you what's below your needle. Okay, and last at the top is your Wi-Fi button. So if you're on a Solaris or if you're on the Altair or the Meridian, you have to be connected to Wi-Fi for certain tasks that you want to do. So if it's blue, it means that you are connected to your internet. If it's black, you're not connected. And on any baby lock machine where you don't have navigation buttons at the top, you can find the same buttons at the bottom of your machine. So all of your settings will be in the piece of paper. The piece of paper is uniform in all the machines. It's just the location that's different. If you have a question about your machine, again, you just touch the question mark. And again, I can go to my operation guide, my sewing guide, or pattern explanation. And this gives you a lot of useful information. It's where you can find your tutorials so that you don't have to drag out your manual. And then finally, we've got our lock screen. So when I touch it, it grays everything out so that if you touch anything, nothing's going to happen. And again, to unlock it, simply depress or unhighlight that icon. One last thing, in the sewing category, on many of the machines you've got additional icons like your laser pointer. The Solaris has a cone that shines down on the bed of your machine. These are going to be covered in a future video, which will go over the upgrades that are specific to certain machines. So that covers the basic navigation of the sewing portion of your sewing or embroidery machine. And we hope you will visit us for future videos to see the upgrade features and yet to come is embroidery.